welcome everybody. We have a lot to tell. I have a lot to tell you, so we're going to dive in straight away. Welcome to my talk, and for this talk I need your phone. So bring up your phones and scan this QR code, because we're going to do a little experiment. And because we are a little bit short on time, please do it quickly. We're going to test the Wi-Fi, the conference Wi-Fi, but we will be okay, I hope. Cool. So it will lead you to some questions, and please raise when you're done. Please raise your hand when you're done, so I know everybody filled in their questions. So I need you to hurry up. Cool. So 2 already finished. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool. Cool. The ones who joined lately, please scan the code, and it will lead you to some to a question. So cool. So when you scan the QR code, it led you to some questions, and it depends on which group you are. Either group A or group B, you got a different first question. So what I did was a little A-B experiment, as they call it. So who of you were in group A? So cool. And who of you got into group B? Oh, okay. Well, I used the PHP random generator, but I didn't thought it was that good, but okay. Cool. So the difference was in the first question, but you all answered the same question: at what age did Mahatma Gandhi die? And I'm curious if there is any difference, but the right answer is 78 years old. So who actually got 78? No one. Okay. So, cool. So let's see the results. So for that, let me change the window. Cool. Well, it works. So thanks, conference Wi-Fi. So we have like 30 respondees, and you can see that the group A has a little bit lower. It's a little bit skewed to the left, and the group B actually got a little bit higher answer, as you can see. So the average lies between 70 and 75 in the different groups. So what is happening here? Cool. So what you might have experienced is what we call the anchoring effect. And it's a well-researched phenomenon in cognitive research, in cognitive psychology, and it explains how you are being influenced while you're being exposed at information. And how does that work? So if you have to answer the question, at what age did Mahatma Gandhi die? Then his face might pop up. You might knew he was from India, and the first question might have popped up in your head. And although you knew he wasn't 9 years old or 140 years old, it still popped in your head, and you might have used it as a reference point. Sorry? What was the question? So the question from the QR code was, at what age did Mahatma Gandhi die? And there were 2 groups, and the first question was actually different between those groups. So whether you had the 9 years old question or the 140 years old question, you might have used it as a reference point, and you thought, well, it's not 9 years old, but let's move it up a little. And if you had 140 years, you might have going a bit lower than 140 years old. And you thought, well, maybe 90 or maybe 80 will be a plausible answer. And you don't have to take my word for it, because it's actually some of the experiments they conducted while researching this phenomenon. So they picked a group of 64 people, and they asked very different questions. So there are like questions about the Da Vinci year of birth, but the Gandhi question was actually one of that research. And they conducted the experiments with two groups. One group who got plausible anchors, and and a group that had non-plausible anchors. And you all fit into the non-plausible anchors group. And what they have shown is that if you got implausible anchors, your answer deviates from the group that had plausible answers. So these numbers tell you that if you had the 140 question, you actually had an average higher than the group that had the plausible answers. Cool. So this is a software conference. And when I think about software, I get influenced all the time. And I think there are a lot of anchors in my head when I'm doing my work. And especially if you, for example, doing planning poker, and I think about the feature and I think, well, it's not a really big feature, it's not that complex, maybe 2 or 3 points, and somebody comes in and says, well, this is a really complex feature. It should be at least 20. Without any substantiation, I get influenced by that number. So I might go higher than 2 or 3, and it influences the way I estimate my features. And it's not always a problem, but if you're aware that you are being biased, you can stand your grounds and ask why is it a complex feature, then you can actually have a good conversation. Cool. And what we have seen can be identified as cognitive biases. And I think if you are making software, you are being exposed, susceptible to many cognitive biases. And I think now is a good time to introduce myself. I'm Peter Wessels. I'm an IT consultant and info support. I'm a software engineer. I'm a teacher, and I'm leader of the Java community within info support. And the cognitive biases we're going to see today are based on my experiences and based on research. So there are actually quite a few phenomena that are really well researched, and we're going to look into those researches as well. Cool. So, I want to talk about 3 common ways we get influenced. How can we identify them? How do they influence the way we make software? And how to prevent from doing any harm. Cool. First one, when labor leads to love. 2 years ago, I moved in with my girlfriend, and it was an empty apartment, and we had to buy a closet. And in the Netherlands, when you need some furniture, you go to IKEA. And then you go to IKEA and you see a nice closet. My girlfriend actually picked this one because she really liked them. But as you know, if you go to IKEA and you buy furniture, it comes in a box. And you have to assemble them yourself. And that was my task. So I had to assemble them. She picked out the closet, I had to assemble them. It was fine, because I liked it. But this is like, I spent 2 hours on assembling the furniture, and I was like this all the time. So if you have bought IKEA furniture and assembled it, you might recognize this. And it cost me 2 hours of blood, sweat, and tears. But I finally managed to do it. And this was the end result. It's still standing in my apartment, still standing, so I might have done something good. But, well, it comes with some defects. I still have some screws, some leftover screws, which might fit there, I think. But I think it's a really nice closet, because I built it myself. But if you ask my girlfriend, I think if she doesn't know about this defect, but if she sees it, I don't think she would value it as much as I do. And what we might have seen here is something what we call the IKEA effect. And it's actually, the terminology is actually coined by these researchers, and they have shown that including labor into building the process actually increases the value you perceive as the builder. So there's actually the same product, but differently valued by the builder and the not builder. And I think most of you don't enjoy assembling IKEA furniture. I don't. But nevertheless, I would value it more. So there's something strange going on. And one experiment they conducted was actually involved in IKEA box itself. And they gathered two groups of people, one who actually built the IKEA box and one group that actually got the IKEA box pre-assembled. So one group was like, okay, what the hell? How I have to assemble this box, and the other group just got the box pre-assembled. And what they asked them was, do you like this product? And it turned out to be that the group which are the builders actually liked the product 50% more than the non-builders. So there was an average, there was a scale of 0 to 5, and the builders actually thought on average they liked it at 3.8, and the non-builders 2.5. Another question they asked was, how much do you want to pay for this box? And the same goes here, because the builders actually wanted to spend more money on this product than the non-builders did. So there is something strange going here. And we are at the software conference, so if you are a software engineer or you're a tester or a product owner, we are all in the process of making something, building software, testing software, making test suites, and all those kinds of products, you can say. So we make stuff. Are we also susceptible to the IKEA effect? Now, I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself. I am. So especially in my early career, I loved the code I made. So it was really, every pull request was kind of my baby, and every time I got like a comment, I thought, oh shit, I thought it was perfect in all its different ways. Now I learned to cope with that, so I learned to cope with feedback, but back then it distracted me from learning from these comments, because they are actually very variable, and because I think it's very good code doesn't say that other ones value it differently. They can objectively value the product more than I can. So in this IKEA effect, I consider two phases. So a phase before building the product and a phase after building the product. And we're going to them through them. So if you think about valuing your product, your code, after you made something and you make up a pull request, are you able to objectively value your work? And if it's similar, if it's trivial, you don't, somebody criticizes your code, it doesn't make you angry. But when it's getting, but when you're getting in an argument, it might hurt you. You might think, okay, it was perfect. I value your code that much, and you're criticizing my code. So the question I want to ask is, can you objectively value the products you make? And because if you value your own work, and back in 2 years back, I made a product. I was in a team actually creating software, and we thought, okay, we were building things from scratch, and we thought, well, it's going good because we deliver value. However, we did everything from scratch, so we didn't use help from others because we valued our work very highly. But it turned out to be very messy at the end, because we didn't follow any best practices. We thought we're doing okay because it brings value to our customers, so why change? However, it created a messy foundation, and some refactoring was inevitable. So when building things from scratch and yourself, you have to think about the investment, because you have to invest time and money into building things from scratch instead of using open source software, for example. It also needed you to invest into maintaining that piece of software, so you can actually spend money on building it, but you also have to spend time and money on maintaining your code. It increases the time of market when you build things from scratch and yourself, because if it's already existing, then you can maybe get to the market earlier. And other problems may arise. So if you build things from scratch, then you might not follow best practices. Cool. So maybe we want to think about, do we need to build things from scratch? Because I like to code things, I like to make code, I like to make products, I like to make things from scratch. But sometimes I need to force myself to actually tapping into open source projects, or work from other companies, or software as a service, or products as a service. And I tend to prefer my own solutions over the solutions that are provided by the rest of the community. So, a question I want to ask you, does it sound any familiar? Please raise your hands if you think you are good. Quite a few. Yeah, great. Awesome. So, why is that? So, why are we susceptible to this bias? So, there could be more things going on, but we have a deeply rooted need for competency. So we want to feel competent in the way we work. Especially I want to be competent, and I think you all want to be competent, because you are in this amazing conference. So if you build things from scratch, it feels good, right? Because you make a product and you see it working, then it's really cool. And because you see it working, because you feel competent at that moment, you have like a better relation with your product, and therefore you might value your product more, because the competency boosts your self-efficacy. And there is something on, also effort justification is something else, because if you are making long hours, especially in the weekends or during the evenings, and you make something and it works, and it costs you blood, sweat and tears, you want that effort to be worth it, right? When I assembled the IKEA furniture, it costed me some scratches, so I want it to be worth it. I want to be that effort is worth it. And that's what we call effort justification. So we want to justify our efforts. Cool. How can we prevent the IKEA effect? So consider third-party products. There are a lot of amazing products by the community, services, products as a services, open source software. Instead of doing things by yourself or making it from scratch, you can consider looking at the open source community and think if that will fix your problem. And what I don't mean is using this package. So I came across the is-odd package and node package. And actually the strangest thing is that it's downloaded 1.9 million times a month. And it's actually one line to tell you if the number is odd. So if you're in JavaScript, then you might not need this package. So the way this works is that there are a lot of node modules that uses each other. So if you introduce one of them, then you get all those little node modules. And it's actually downloaded 33 million times in total. Sorry, the question is? Yeah, they have improved upon the one line, I think, I hoped. Because you have to remember, you're not the first to problems, even in new technologies. Because in a previous project, I used CQRS, for example, and there are a lot of things, a lot of problems you have to address, but they're already addressed in other technologies, and you can consider tapping into those solutions. And building upon expertise from the community. For example, these conferences is a really good starting ground to learn from others and other community, other companies. There are great companies in this booth which offers a lot of great products, I think. And you could consider joining those so you know the next time you know a community to tap into. So another trick or another good practice, I think, is to make your choices explicit. So one method is to write an architectural decision record, if it's actually an architectural decision. But making your choices explicit requires you to think through them. To think, is this the right decision? Do I have thought about everything? And it enables you to review your decision. It enables you to store them and reevaluate them later. And other colleagues or other members from the community can actually review your decision and think if that makes any sense, that decision. But the most important one is to be aware of your bias. Because if you admit to yourself that you love the product because you build it, then you're going to think about it twice when you retrieve some feedback from your team members. So be aware of your bias helps. So, and I think we can be more effective and efficient if we prevent the IKEA effect, and we can make better software. Cool. So, another effect I want to talk about today is joining the majority. So, if you visit conferences a lot, then you might see these new technologies popping up. It's like native images, microservices, blockchain, smart contracts, all these amazing technologies. And they tend to get a lot of attention because they are new and they are cool. I think they are cool. And 2 years back, I had the opportunity to start a greenfield project. And I thought, ooh, a greenfield project. I don't get a lot of chances to do a greenfield project. Before then, I had only brownfield projects. I had to cope with legacy systems, for example. And now, we could make things from scratch. So that's a recipe for disaster, right? Well, not really. But what we felt is like kids in the candy store, because we were regular conference attendees, so we looked at all these new technologies and thought, oh, well, what are we going to use now? So we thought, okay, domain-driven design, really cool, let's do that. And we thought, oh, event-driven architecture will fit into domain-driven design, very good. So we picked and chose a few technologies, and I'm exaggerating a bit, but yeah, well, we were biased by all these technologies we have seen at conferences. And we actually picked quite a few, but it kept us going because we were really enthusiastic, so we really took off, but the struggle was real because we had to learn those new technologies and to be productive at the same time, because we have seen them on conferences and we thought it's a great idea. But actually understanding the nitty-gritty details of those technologies is a whole nother league. And we had to fix all these problems and connecting all these dots together. And the struggle was real, and yeah, after a year we had to do some significant rework. And what we have experienced as a team was similar like the bandwagon effect. And the bandwagon effect is a term that originates from the idea that people like to join something that's in motion. So when a new technology gains traction or widespread acceptance, people tend to jump on the bandwagon and join that movement. And you can see it everywhere. You can see it in stocks, social media, posts that going viral, or politics. People tend to join the majority. And there's actually some research that actually shows that people are subjected to this bias. So In Hungary, they conducted a research, and they have shown that political polls not only captures the voters' decision, but also influences the way they vote. And they actually have a multi-party system there, so you can choose which party you want to vote for, and they had like 2 rounds. So they compared the results from the first round to the second round. And they have shown that, or they saw that people tend to get biased because they choose for the political parties that gained momentum. And they actually switched their vote because for that reason. So this is politics. So software. So consider you are in a meeting, for example, and you have like a lot of REST services, and someone wants to change all those REST services to, let's say, GraphQL. Because you've seen it at a conference, he thought it's really cool, you can do a whole lot of stuff with it. And so that's the only argument he has. And other people might join that movement because they think, okay, it's looking very good, it's very cool, GraphQL is cool. So let's join him, let's join the movement. And then people tend to join the movement as well. Because if you stand your ground, you have to be brave. And people tend to be biased by the majority that is gaining momentum, like going to GraphQL instead of REST. Because stopping a moving train is sometimes very difficult, and it might hurt you. So it's not that strange. But if you base your technology decisions on popularity instead of eligibility, you might not have the best fit for purpose. You might waste resources if you don't take into account the value for your customers, let's say. It might be a good decision, but if you don't think about what value does it bring to my customer, then it might not be the best decision. Cool. But if you work on a monolith, for example, others might ask you, are you still working on a monolith? That's so 1999. But that might be the best solution to your problem. And going against the bandwagon requires bravery. Do you dare to stand by your grounds and challenge others' views? And you all are subjected to these bias. So if you look at this, at the app, for example, there are a lot of likes and a lot of people that says, okay, I'm going to attend this talk, and you might be biased towards the talks that have the most people there. So you might go to that talk. And I'm glad you all came to my talk, but nevertheless. And some backends lead you actually somewhere. Because if you used Subversion and you jumped on the bandwagon for Git, then it might lead you somewhere. And the same goes for SOAP and REST. XML to JSON. It might have led you somewhere. Cool. So why are we subjected to this bias? It might be due to the availability heuristic. So heuristics are simple strategies that humans use to quickly form judgments, make decisions, and form solutions to complex problems. It's actually a shortcut you take to save your mental energy, because we have limited mental energy, and every decision requires you to use some of that energy. And it's a precious resource, so you want to use it efficiently. And you might know the hype cycle. The hype cycle describes the phases for new technologies. And so these new technologies are very visible for everyone. So you can argue that they also are more available to you, because you read a lot of, if you're on Twitter, for example, you read more about new technologies that are popping up that are solving complex solutions than not popular technologies. So the availability heuristic. There are also other causes. So Social proof is one. So when you're in an uncertain area, you look for others how to behave. So you look for clues, okay, what decisions should I make? And then you tend to follow the ones around you if you are in a certain environment. People have the desire to be liked or accepted. So they have the idea that if they make the same decision, they fit into a crowd, for example. And people might think, okay, if the majority votes for that party, then the majority is right. All kind of explanation why we might be subjected to this bias. Cool. So how can we prevent the bandwagon effect? So first up, be aware of your bias helps a lot. So identify when you are just following others without any really good arguments, for example. So if you be aware of that, then you can think for yourself, okay, this is a trigger, I need to think this through. Or do I need to think this through? Because going to a conference talk might not be impact your life very much, but going from REST to GraphQL might impact your business. Another thing you can do is educate yourself with the hype cycle. So if you tend to choose for new technologies, you might want to check the hype cycle, and the hype cycle will actually tell you if it's more visible to you and if it actually is a mature technology. If you want to use new technologies, for example, then it's also a good resource for you. And if you use a new technology, you can ask yourself, okay, what problem does it solve? Does it actually better than before? Do I have that problem? Do I fully understand the trade-off? Because new technologies aren't free. And what complexity does it add? Because nothing comes for free. And there is actually a great topic which is very closely related to this bias. It's called Be Aware of the Survivorship Bias. So I will post the slides on Twitter, and you can click the link, and then you can see this talk, which is a really good talk on J4. Cool. I will post them later on. Love the ceremony. So during the time I made this presentation, I visited my grandma, and she was looking at the coronation of the king in the UK. And she loved it. She loved everything about it. She loved the symbols. She loved every bit of it. And I was looking at the whole theater, I would say, and I thought, okay, I thought he was king already, and what does it actually change this day? So you might value it as my grandma did, but I thought, okay, what's going on here? And it tends that people like ceremony, because ceremony is easy. Going to meetings and just telling your colleagues what you're working on is really easy. But telling what's wrong and how to get this sprint done is a very difficult question. So in software, we have a lot of ceremonies. We have these stand-ups, refinements, and all these ceremonies we do. And if we just stick to the ceremony and not ask the difficult question, we might not get the fullest out of these ceremonies. And then you might end up in this situation. I accepted the job as a senior engineer, and now I'm 8 hours in meetings. So what are we experiencing here? So we might experience the bike shed effect. So it's also known as the Parkinson's law of triviality, and it actually explains that people tend to allocate more time to the trivial task than the real important questions. So they tend to discuss more about how to paint this bike shed instead of how to make this nuclear plant, which might be the most important questions you need to ask. And I came across this tweet, and it actually is some research which goes into categorizing your emails. So who of you are categorizing your emails? So spam or social media. Okay, then I have bad news for you. So research show that you can actually take like 67 hours a year to categorize your emails, and they have shown that it's actually getting harder for you to find your emails. But maybe you're doing something good here, but they've shown that it might get harder to find your emails. But Why do we do this? It might be due to that this categorizing your emails might be a trivial task for you. It's very easy to put something in your spam or in your other folders. So, like I said, we tend to allocate disproportionately amount of time to the easier task. So if you see this graph, then you have the easy versus the hard task and the trivial versus the consequential task. So the consequential tasks are actually the task that impacts the way you operate, and the trivial tasks are the easy ones. So this bike shed effect tend to be active when tasks are very easy and very trivial. And then we tend to allocate more time for these tasks. And I came across this post from an email group. It was very old, so it was in the 90s, I think. It was from FreeBSD. Its maintainer actually wrote this. Just because you're capable of doing something, you should not discuss everything about it, because it's not going to change the way you paint your bike set. But we really like to do it because we feel like, okay, I know a lot about how to paint a bike set. I don't know much about how to make a nuclear power plant, for example. Cool. Does it sound familiar for some of you? I see some nodding. Cool. So why are we subjected to this bias? So it might be very easy. It's just that we feel more comfortable in this task. It's more comfortable to discuss, okay, what kind of code style do we need to use? Instead of, okay, how do we change this architecture to make it more sustainable in the future? That's a really difficult task. But making so changing your code style, discussing if you need tabs versus spaces, it's more easy, right? So there are some examples I can think of. So the tabs versus spaces discussion, yeah, it can take a lot of time, but yeah, it doesn't need you anywhere, I think, but we can discuss later on. So single quotes versus double quotes. Flame wars about tools. Does it really matter? Does it really impact the way you make software? I don't think so. And I come across this bike set effects in pull requests, for example. Let's use Lisp and empty list instead of an empty list. Okay? And every time I come across such a comment, I have to read it and I have to discuss it with my colleague, and I spend more time on it, and it costs me mental energy. Does it really matter? Does it add any value to the way we make software? Make sure you use the final keyword. Yeah, could be. You could choose for that, but does it really need a discussion at a pull request? Please use the Stream API because it will be much faster. That's the great one. And then you have a whole lot of discussion, and you can get into performance, and you can do some experiments only because someone thinks it will be faster. Of course, it is an interesting topic, and we feel comfortable discussing this. But does it really add value when you are making a pull request? So how can we prevent the bike set effect? So what you can do is automate your trivial matters. So we're in the business of automation. We automate everything. Why can't we automate these decisions? How can we do that? So there are actually a few tools that can help you with that. Error-Prone by Google, for example, can help you by identifying some common ways you write your code, and they can actually refactor it. Checkstore can help you with the code formatting. And all these tools help you to avoid discussions that require you to use mental energy. And then you got 99 problems, but the weight line of 80 isn't one of those anymore. So make meetings worth your time. So you can actually put in some more structure in your meetings to ask the difficult questions. So what you can do is set a goal for each meeting. So everyone is on the same line. Everyone knows what we're going to do today. keep on topic, focus on outcomes. Really helps you to make the most of your time. And the feedback loop is actually quite a valuable one. I introduced it in my company, the company I work for, and after each meeting we ask ourselves, was this worth our time? Does it actually make value to the way we make software? And if it's no, then we need to have something to improve upon, or maybe skip the meeting at all. And what really helps is dedicate time for your trivial matters. So if you have to discuss some trivial matters and some really difficult questions, the trivial matters might take up more room than they need to. So if you allocate time for these complex matters, then you can really focus on the important and difficult stuff. And what I don't mean is using shock collars for everyone. So you can, I didn't try it, but I think it helps. So in order to reduce the stand-up time, like after 10 seconds, it's like, okay, finish now. Don't think this will work. Cool. So let's wrap up. So what we have seen is the IKEA effect, when labor leads to love. What we've seen is the bandwagon effect, when you want to join a movement that is gaining momentum. And the bike setting effect, that we waste our time on our trivial matters. Cool. So I think if you're aware of your bias, you are able to battle these biases and make good software. And if you think back, and in hindsight, we should have done things differently and the outcomes will be different, then you might be susceptible to the hindsight bias. The hindsight bias actually tells you that people convince themselves that if they make different choices, that the outcome will be different. But there are all kinds of things involved that will influence the result, so that's not always the case. And you can say, thanks, Captain Hindsight. Cool. So I want to end with a quote of Mahatma Gandhi: "The future depends on what you do today." Thank you for your attention. Please give your feedback in the app. I will be looking forward to it. I will post the slides online.